In this episode, we meet three more influential panelists who are rocking the boat and forging paths for change in cities across the U.S. A Black female rapper from Alabama writing words to re-educate the public on Black power.
Unless we know ourselves, to know thyself is the most important thing.
A pro-Palestinian Israeli immigrant in Boulder, Colorado, who specializes in cult psychology.
You can make a lot of mistakes confronting people by either pushing them further into their belief or making it harder for them to leave.
And a Pan-African award-winning slam poet in Denver who went undercover for 8 months as a white supremacist online.
I had to deal with a lot of threats. But this one was one of the ones that I felt least equipped to deal with.
Each give their inside view from the front lines for Black Lives Matter as we explore politics, white supremacy, and cult psychology.
Hi, I'm Cara Cruickshank. Welcome to Essential Stories, an independent grassroots docuseries and live roundtable discussions that give voice to people on the front lines of our world's most pressing social issues.
Born in Mobile, Alabama, Kiki Dexter draws inspiration in her art from her Southern roots and an objective to challenge the current power structure with thought-provoking lyricism. She is the director of media and art with the nonprofit Aim for the Heart in Los Angeles, California. She uses her voice, her words, and her music to promote positive messages for the masses.
One of the things that, I've realized is, I come from a family that's a very diverse family, different skin tones, different mentalities. And what I've seen even in my family is colorism, colorism that's brought on by people who are darker than me or people who are lighter than me. It's a crazy mentality that we all have to shake. And so one of the things that I do is to really try to challenge people to question everything. Things I think that allows for this system to continue, this attitude, this kind of status quo of racism that's a part of our stories now, is because people have accepted what's been going on and they haven't even gone back into history to understand how we've gotten here. History is one of my favorite things. I rap about it all the time. I'm digging into it all the time. Unless we know ourselves, to know thyself is the most important thing. Unless we know where we've come from, we'll never have the American experiment. We'll never flourish because we are repeating ourselves. Someone spoke about systematic things that we have to fight against. And what I saw with realizing the similarities between the two different places that I've lived is that this is a whole system that spans across the whole country that I'm only getting a microscopic view into with living in these various places. So yeah, on the topic of, white supremacy especially, I've originally come from Alabama. And so the great thing about being in California is, I've been exposed to a lot more people. But one of the things that I found was I thought like I was escaping some type of oppression from Alabama and realized that it spanned from Alabama all the way to the West Coast. It's just decorated in a different way. One of the things that has really come to the forefront of my mind is, how like right now I'm in a Black community. And what I find is from here back to Alabama and everywhere in between, when you're in the Black community, you find very similar things. You find a lack of food desert. I'm a pescatarian, actually. I'm really big into eating food that's healthy for me. And so it's really hard to find that both when I'm back home in my hood in Alabama and where I live now. I find there's so many like convenience stores with liquor stores, and there's a bunch of churches. That's the consistent theme. No food, liquor stores, and churches in every hood. And so my goal is, like I said, to make art that pushes people to look beyond the moment and to think about other ones around them. And so on the topic of, I guess, moving forward, of transcending this, we do have to reevaluate the relationships with each other, our families, how we think about things, and like I said, just transcend.
Yuval Lev is a writer, a PhD, and a public speaker who specializes in culture studies, the evolution of religious psychology, and the phenomenon of fervor and sudden conversion.
I'm an immigrant from Israel. I have a little bit of an outsider view on this, but I come from a severely racist society. I would say definitely worse than what I've seen in the United States. I think that when it comes to white supremacy-themed cults and groups and ideologies in the United States, it's usually a very gradual conversion. So it is, I think, different than the most extreme cults that we see. But there are, of course, many similarities between, in general, I think that cults can have a theme, and they can be a Christian-themed cult, a Muslim-themed cult, multi-level marketing, which they call prosperity cults. There's nationalist cults, and there's racist cults. And in a way, the theme is not as interesting from a theoretical point of view, but I wrote my PhD, and I'm also right now writing a book about fervor, what cults can teach us about the evolution of religion. I look at extreme versions of religiosity, and those usually include sudden conversions, where you go to a weekend and you can change your life. The white supremacist theme, that cults with the white supremacist theme that we're talking about are very interesting. They're closely related to nationalist-themed cults, especially people who are in the state of fervor, but not all are. But many of the trolls that you might meet online will be. They have blind spots, so there's things that they don't see that's right in front of them. It can be infuriating sometimes to talk to cult members and them not acknowledge things, but those blind spots are real. And I think that you can make a lot of mistakes confronting people by either pushing them further into their belief or making it harder for them to leave.
Of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
As Steve Hassan, author of the book The Cult of Trump, says, when people are being brainwashed, they think they're making their own decisions. They think they're doing God's work. They think they're saving the world. And above all, they think they made a conscious decision to do all these things all on their own. Since one of the pillars of cultism is to isolate victims, it may be that the strongest strategy to dismantle white supremacy is to continue to find ways to effectively humanize, build cultural bridges and human connection to dispel the constructs that create perceived separateness.
I remember being called highly colorful racial slurs by those who use the anonymity of the internet as a Klan hood. And some of them were pretty creative, actually.
Theo Wilson is a public speaker who began his speaking career in the NAACP at the age of 15. He's an award-winning slam poet who went undercover for 8 months as a white supremacist online.
I suppose that the best way to describe my philosophy is as a Pan-African humanist. I want to help the human family, starting with La Casa, my home first, my hood, my roots. And with that philosophy, as it was evolving, I went undercover for 8 months as a white supremacist online. I didn't realize that it had any redeeming social value whatsoever. I was living my life at the same time. I was taking notes. This is after I went viral on my own Facebook page with Black Lives Matter content. So I was creating videos based on what was happening during that time. You know what I mean? So this was during the time of Trayvon Ferguson, of the killing of Walter Scott, the shooting at the church in the Carolinas. This is what the milieu of the circumstances was. Obama was still president. Trump hadn't come online yet. And I had this other alternate identity. For 8 months, I immersed myself in that kind of thought. But I got traumatized from that. And I don't talk about that during my speech. That was not in my TED Talk. But what I was most interested in is how this phenomenon resurged again. And what kind of threat does this actually pose for Black folks? I'm a survivor myself of police brutality. I came up in an environment, this milieu, which is all kind of gang activity. My father's a former gangster, and I had to deal with a lot of threats. But this one was one of the ones that I felt least equipped to deal with. Then, of course, my homeboy gets killed in 2011 by the police. So that, if you was to say, was to profile me, I was radicalized in a certain way. Like I went all in. And what I find is that, number one, systems are very interesting when they reflect group psychology. I think that if we look at this in any other way other than systems and how we've mechanized these collective agreements, we're gonna lose it. The system of white supremacy, they knew it was a lie because you literally had to pass laws to stop human beings from competing with you. So they've known it was a lie from the beginning, right? So these agreements need to be broken. And the second thing is, I speak at universities and I let folks know, if we don't solve this, the American experiment can very much fail right in our faces. And when it fails, it will be very bloody. And for those of my homies who are like on the woke side, I'd be like, don't root for it too hard, because when society falls, it often falls on Black folks first. We saw that with Hurricane Katrina. I'm afraid that we're gonna see it near the end of this year when the economy fallout really shows up. The only solution I've seen to this is try to adjust each other as human beings first, and then build a new system from there that solves these problems by mechanizing them into a culture.
The revolution has begun. This is the largest civil rights movement in recorded history. As Theo said, it is time to humanize and to permanently dismantle the systems that divide and destroy. America's dirty secret is out. The whole world is watching. We need to continue to come together as creative minds. We need to build compassionate, effective strategies. And we need to lift up progressive women of color and feminist men of color to lead us into a new future. It's time to decenter the white narrative. It's high time. In our next episode, this power team of 9 activists in cities across the U.S. will explore the question, what are the current strategies of white supremacist groups, and how do we continue to dismantle their agenda? Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel so that more people can hear these essential stories.